Today, Tyler Ramsey, our newest coach within the X Recovery program, and I are going to be tackling some of the biggest mistakes we see people making during the texting phase. How are you doing, Tyler?
Doing good. How are you, Chris?
We're hanging in there. We're talking about Tyler's ring light before we started. He got like this new setup on his computer in this ring light. And he was asking me if I had one. And I said, I do, but I don't use it. I'm already white enough.
Yeah, it makes quite a difference. I'll have to say, once you get yourself a nice 4K camera and a ring light, you look totally different on camera.
It's true. I'm stuck on my little MacBook camera, and it's like fuzzy and stuff. But yeah, anyways, we're going to be talking about the mistakes people make when getting their exes, when texting their exes when trying to get them back. And you ran a Facebook Live today in the private Facebook group. You said there was quite a few on this list that you were experiencing.
I was really having to tell some people. So yeah, it was interesting. So it's good. I'm glad we're going to go over it.
Yeah. So we got quite a few mistakes written. And what I think we should probably do or approach it is we should probably just explain what it is and then both give our kind of perspectives on it. To see if we can add anything that the other person's missing. And I guess I'll go first. So probably the biggest mistake, and this is actually going back to when I first created Ex-Boyfriend Recovery, I coined this acronym called GNAT, G-N-A-T, going nuts at texting. And this really kind of hits into the anxious behavior you get after a breakup. But basically, it's when you go nuts at texting. So you go through a breakup and then you just blow your ex's phone up trying to like fix things right away and beg for them back. And the analogy I always used was it's like a bunch of gnats swarming your head and you kind of like swat them away, but they don't go away. They just continue like going and you have to end up like running to get them away, but then you're running and they're still following you. And it's just like the most annoying thing. And the reason I came up with that acronym actually is because like before I wrote this article about like going nuts at texting, that literally happened to me. So that's actually how the acronym came up. Like I was like walking on a baseball field playing softball, like the co-ed softball. We would have like a team every Sunday and a bunch of gnats just started flying around. And I was running around the outfield and people are like, what the hell is Chris doing? He was just like running around. I was trying to get rid of the gnats, but that's how exes look at you if you're going nuts at texting.
Oh my God. I actually learned something on this podcast now. I had no idea. I always knew what gnat was, but I had no idea it stood for something.
Oh, really?
No, I had no idea.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, I knew the context of what it was, but I had no idea there was an actual acronym behind it.
Yeah, there's an acronym behind it and a real life story behind it. I mean, I went all out for that. That was like the first big thing that caught on.
Wow. That's a pretty good coin, I'll have to say.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. So do you have any, like, other than the general definition of like natting, like what would you say describes someone who is like in this state of mind?
Yeah. So this person's usually, most of the time a gnat, or in my experience is, exactly when it's usually at the very beginning of a breakup where, the loss has just occurred and, someone basically begging for their ex back or, constantly texting them, calling them, almost that really, really, kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die if I don't get to talk to them kind of thing. And I'm going to go through every step, to get there or try every manipulation tactic to get them to text me back. So that's kind of what it ends up turning into.
Yeah. I mean, just piggybacking off what you're saying, I think the irony behind natters is they think that behavior is like going to fix things.
Yeah.
And it always has the opposite effect. It always makes them want to push you away further. And it's just a big mistake.
Yeah, it definitely is. And so that's something that you definitely want to stay away from when you're going through this process, just because, just creates a lot more of a gap between you and your ex when you do stuff like that.
Yeah, for real. So the next one on the list is trying to immediately get a commitment out of your ex. So
this one's a good one. Yeah. So I actually talked about this earlier. And so a lot of people feel like, and, I actually see this, when people even come out of no contact and they want to go more into a texting phase, and where they're texting their ex more, they send like 3 text messages, and then they are like, well, do you want to get back together? And I'm like, after 3, I'm like, that might be a little quick. And so basically, they were so strong going through the no contact, and then all of it just got ruined because of that. And so that's what's so disappointing. And, when you're actually reaching out after no contact, you want to be very platonic, and you want to be non-emotional, act like you have your life together without them. And it almost makes your ex wonder why you're acting that way. And so it makes them a little bit more anxious. I'm like, have they just moved on, or that kind of thing? But, when you go the opposite way, where you're like, oh, well, they've just spent this whole entire 30 or 45 days of no contact, and just to get, a commitment out of me, or to reconsider the relationship. So.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't say much more other than, it's a big mistake. It's kind of like jumping that value ladder concept that we often talk about. But I actually have an interesting story that happened. Was it yesterday? I interviewed a success story, someone who actually not only got her ex back, but she got married to her ex. And before I started interviewing her, she started telling me, she said, like, Chris, I'm not sure if I'm going to be a good interview. And I said, oh, why? And she said, well, it's because I never made it out of no contact, meaning like he asked for me back during no contact, which she took to mean like, oh yeah, I jumped the value ladder. I like went all the way to those in-person interactions. We immediately got back together. But I was like, you know what? No, like, come on. I want to find out exactly what happens. I'm always interested in kind of like these aberrations and why they occur. But what was interesting is when I interviewed her, it was always him that was the one to kind of initiate. So like he had been like day 40 of no contact. She was doing like a 45-day no contact. Day 40 of no contact. He reached out to her basically asking for her back. So it's almost like he got to the finish line. She got him to the finish line, and he didn't quite cross the finish line because he didn't ask for her back technically, but he was like right there. And so she trusted her gut, broke no contact. And of course they got back together, and now she's engaged to him. But what I found interesting is a lot of people will misinterpret that situation as thinking like, oh, well, it worked for her. But the only reason it worked for her is because her ex was already at a state where he was initiating, trying to push things over the finish line. That's a much different situation than if you're the one trying to push your ex over the finish line.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the intricacies of that I would say that maybe I could add on.
Well, and I actually have a comment with that too. Is like, so some people misinterpret, what you just said a little bit differently too. So like, it's a big difference if your ex is like, hey, I want you back, versus, hey, I miss you.
Right.
And so those are very different. And some people want to read those as, oh, yeah, those are very different. And one requires a break in no contact and one doesn't. Merely missing you versus, I want you back. I want to have a conversation about changing the relationship, or, getting back together. Those are very different things, because what that shows is it's more minimal effort to see if you're still around. And it's almost like a test, instead of like, your ex taking the initiative of like, I want to be back together with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even piggybacking off what you just said, when I think back to the success story that I interviewed yesterday, if you take kind of the play devil's advocate and assume that she didn't break no contact, so she broke no contact at 40 days to see her ex, and it worked out for her. But if you were to take a situation where she didn't do it and she saw it through and stuck to her program, I still think she would have gotten him back with our way, which is like a little bit longer, but we're trying to build that foundation out. He was just so enamored and missed her so much, and was basically asking for her back without actually officially doing it, that it worked out for her. But it is a risk to break no contact. To Tyler's point, we see a lot of times where an ex will say they miss you, and then you're like, oh, cool, I can break no contact. You break no contact, and guess what happens? They're like, oh, thanks for seeing me.
Yeah.
Or you sleep with them, and they're like, okay, cool, I got what I want. There's a lot of ways it can go south.
Yep. That is so true. And that's something that you don't want to skip. And you just kind of talked about, skipping the value chain. And that's something that's really important, where you just meet the need of your ex currently in that very lonely part that they're sending that text of "I miss you." So basically, usually in those times that an ex is going to do that is when they feel lonely, their needs are not being met right then and there, or they're cycling through the dating apps and they're not getting the attention they want, and so they're like, all right, I'm going to go get it out of this person. And then as soon as that need's met, they're comfy once again, and then they navigate life all over.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something powerful you just said there with like going. So assuming you go through a breakup, the natural assumption is, oh, I can do better than the person I was with. And then you go on the dating apps and you're like, why is this so hard? Why? I was wrong. So you go back to what's familiar to you. So that's an interesting kind of part of the process. And trying to get a commitment out of your ex too much or too soon often just sort of derails everything for you. You want to take the next big mistake?
Yeah.
Or at least want to just randomly pick one?
Sure. So I think a good one I see a lot of the times is like, using text messages to tell your ex that you've changed instead of showing it. And so I think, we definitely, should really kind of harp on that a little bit, because I do see that often. Yeah.
I mean, I always kind of take this as writers, they often tell this concept to like novelists, like show, don't tell. So there's like this interesting thing where they realize that audiences hate being told things. They like being shown things. Well, the same thing I think is true of exes. A lot of times there's someone who's like truly over the breakup, someone who's truly gotten past an ex or has changed or has improved their life in some way, won't feel the need to tell their ex in text messages like, oh yeah, look at how awesome I am, or I'm this. And I think we've all had an experience where we've been on the receiving end of that, where you'll talk to someone and you'll sit there and think like, why won't this person because it makes you look kind of insecure. Like you're like trying too hard, as opposed to just letting them see it naturally come through in conversation, but also naturally through social media, that indirect method of like just naturally posting things that are making you happy. And that's enough to show them that, hey, there's a little bit of a different vibe here. Yep.
No, I totally agree. And so, you really want to make sure that you're just showing those actions instead of, telling them, because you're right. It does kind of look like you're really like pushing way too hard to push an agenda, and, people feel that energy. And so that, you're actively putting things out there for them to see. And so, and I also think that when you do those things, it shows that you're eager. But also when you're not doing those things and you are so for instance, I don't know, I guess it's better just to use an example. If your ex was upset about, being too needy and anxious, well, if you're not texting them all the time, and instead of just telling them, oh yeah, I've not very eager or very anxious anymore, just not doing it by not texting them often, just texting them intermittently, they're going to feel that. And it also is kind of attractive in a way too, because it shows that you don't care a lot about your ex in general.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you really think about it, someone who is extremely anxious throughout the relationship, it's almost like you walk on eggshells around them. So the less likely you are to exhibit those anxious tendencies to your ex, they begin to stop walking on eggshells. And in an odd way, I know for certainly that I've been in relationships before where you're almost like kind of trying to test the other person to see how are they going to react to this. And your ex will do that. If you have a history of like overreacting anytime your ex mentions another girl, or another guy or something like that, they might just slip something in there like that to see like, will this set them off? And they're not going to just do it one time and be like, oh, okay, check mark, they're fixed. No, they'll do it naturally a bunch of times just to see like, have they sort of changed their tune on that? So, I mean, there's all sorts of weird ways in which you need to show how you've changed. And I think you can get like really creative. There's some really creative ways that you can show that you've changed. But one of the most creative ways I've come across actually has to do with utilizing that sphere of influence. So it's kind of a natural rule in sales too, if you think about it. Like, who do you trust more? Do you trust all right, let's just like anyone listening to this. Do you trust me sitting up here and saying like, yeah, buy the Extra Recovery program, buy coaching with us. We're best. We are unbiased. We are the best in the world, versus your best friend who's coached with Tyler or Anna or me, gotten their exes back, and they come saying to tell you like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what just happened. Like, I listened to these. It sounds crazy. Just do it. It worked. Well, the same thing can apply kind of to that sphere of influence, where if you truly have improved your life in all of these ways, you can actually affect the people around your ex. And then the people around your ex will say like, you're not going to believe what I just saw Sarah or John doing, you know, and then they start to take it a lot more seriously. So there's that underrated aspect of the sphere of influence. And this all is happening while you're texting them too, which kind of like bolsters everything up, which I'm actually going to segue into the next thing, which is like, I think the biggest misconception people have, or the big mistake people have, is thinking that it's like one singular text or one singular phrase that's going to make your ex come back, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's not really one thing that you're going to be able to say that will draw them in. And I really think that's the really big hang up, especially, you know, going back to the beginning part of our conversation with the natting. It's like, you know, if I say a certain thing, you know, it's going to make them wake up, or, you know, I'm going to get them to think about a memory and it's going to make them miss me. That kind of thing. And so there's really, the rapport builds over time. And so it really is, there's just not really one thing that you can actually say to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big flaw with the industry that we're in, I mean, we're dealing with breakups, right? And there unfortunately is a lot of people who will say things to try to take advantage of brokenhearted individuals, and they will give them these big misconceptions on how the process works. So the biggest misconception I always see people having is like, hey, you can help me get my ex back in 30 days. And I actually just recently posted a YouTube video that says like, no, we can't. That is not our average success story. Our average success story is between 2 months and 7 months after working with us. That means if you've been broken up for 5 months after working with us for 2 to 7 months, that's when our average success story occurs. So I'm trying to create like this perception of this is exactly what real life looks like. It's going to take time. Yeah. So anyone is sitting up there and saying like, say these 3 phrases and your ex's knees will buckle and then they'll beg for you back and they'll be obsessed with you. I don't think it quite works that way. I think there are things you can say that have knee-jerk positive reactions. But it's not going to make them have some sort of epiphany and be like, I'm going to come back, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it too. You know, their life experiences, you know, the rapport building that you're having, your life experiences and that kind of thing too. There's just a lot at play. And that's why you see that 2 to 7 months that vary, you know, very significantly, because, you know, both parties have to be in the right mindset too.
Yeah. And I actually think the 2 to 7 months that I was basing it on was the last 10 success stories that I interviewed. But I haven't added in like the newer batch, right? So we actually had, I think Bethany, and if you don't know who Bethany is, just go to our YouTube channel. She's the chick with the purple hair. She has like the craziest situation. She succeeded, right? But it took her 2 years to succeed. So there's a huge variance, not only in the realistic time frame that it's going to take to successfully get an ex back, but also the situation you're in. Well, like some situations, like for example, on again, off again relationships, easiest situation to succeed in. There's always a precedent there that is this just another trip around the wheel? The challenge with that is staying together. Then you look at people like where your ex has moved on to someone new, or you've been blocked, or there's a long distance situation. Those naturally will take longer amounts of time.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're dealing with rebounds and that kind of thing. You know, you have to wait till that almost dissolves.
Yeah. So moving on, and I would say this is probably going to be our last big mistake that we see. And that actually is something that no one really talks about. And
Yeah.
that's like, so do you want to take it or me?
Yeah, so I feel like it honestly, we say saving the best for last, because this
Yes.
is, and I think in every single coaching session I always mention this, because it is like, I kind of place it up here, and then everything else is secondary to it. And that is, you really need to be in the right mindset to text your ex. And that, that's a packed statement. So, really what that means is like, you need to come from a place that you feel secure, and almost like what I think Chris has mentioned this before, is like where, you would like to have your ex back, but you're going to be okay if you don't get them back. And that's when the mindset change it, or when you can get to that mindset and you can change it, is when you will make all the right decisions in texting, because you're not going to be too eager. You're going to know exactly when to end the conversation. You're still living your life, because, at that point you're kind of okay without having them. And so, you're still doing very fun things, living life. And so that's really the mindset you should be in before. And I always say, when people are in no contact, if let's say you do a 45-day no contact, if you can't wait 3 more days to text them, you're not in the right mindset, because your anxiousness will get the better of you. And so that means that you're counting down the days to be able to do something like that. And that just means that you're not in a headspace to text them just quite yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for Tyler hits the nail on the head when he says we save the best to last. For me, this is actually the thing that I've been studying the most. And this is like the biggest thing that I took from just interviewing success stories and trying to identify patterns. I noticed 2 things. Number one was people often say, look, how do I get in the right mindset? Well, that's what the entire no contact rule is supposed to be about. And if you're not in the right mindset by the time you end the no contact rule, you haven't succeeded with the no contact rule. Even if you've gotten your ex to miss you and beg for you and things like that, if you're not ready to have a conversation where you're not controlled by fear. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of, to Tyler's statement, he said like it's a packed statement, right? And ultimately, if you look at it at its whole, someone who's not in the right mindset is going to be completely controlled by fear. Someone who's extremely anxious is controlled by fear because they fear they're losing the other person completely.
Yeah.
Someone who is free of that fear just doesn't care if they get their ex back or if their ex responds or not. And that almost frees them from looking. And this is kind of the unfortunate trick of being in the right mindset. If you are in the right mindset, the wool gets kind of lifted over your head and you realize, hey, there's more out here than my ex. And you start to lose interest in your ex.
Yeah.
And key we noticed with success stories is the people who were able to kind of lift the wool from over their eyes, they realized this concept of like, wait, I can move on and be happy with someone else. I'm not always going to be with my ex. There's always an opportunity for me to find someone better. It's not like they're that one person for me. There's other people that can be that for me. And that alone makes your ex fearful. That alone makes them be like, wait a second. I thought you were the one that was anxious. Now that's why I think we start to see this uncanny correlation. And so, I mean, that to me is the best to last, which is like really looking at your state of mind. And I've even tried to identify the state of mind by telling people to outgrow their ex during no contact.
Yeah.
Like, get to a point emotionally where you can move on and be okay with it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think fear is a big thing. And I think you hit on the last part a little bit, as far as, it's fear of losing your ex. And it's also sometimes that you don't feel worthy or good enough to get your ex back. And that kind of goes into the concept of ungettable, of like, you can't do better. And so instead of you thinking like, oh, I'm not worthy enough to get my ex back, you should be in the mindset of my ex isn't worthy enough to have me back. And that's the key change right there. And if you can get to that part, that makes all the difference.
Yeah. You know, the irony behind this mindset thing that we're talking about is it's really has nothing to do with your texting. Like that's the irony behind it. Like you're going to sit here and say, like, I imagine people are sitting here and listening. They're thinking, wait, you're sitting here and saying that if I'm just in the right mindset when I text my ex, I'll get better results. And I'm sitting here and saying, yes, we've seen it happen enough to realize it helps. Now what Tyler and I think with this, what we're talking about, that right mindset is not tactical, but it's strategical. So the tactical things come in when you're looking at things like word count, or like, how do you hook an ex with a good first contact text message, or how do you keep a conversation going? How do you keep an ex engaged? We're not trying to talk about that, because you need to master the strategy first before you master the tactics. Now, if you want to master the tactics, that's what coaching with Tyler is for. See, like, that's how you segue, Tyler.
Yes. I guess you're a little bit more of a professional when it comes to that. That's a little bit more experience.
That's like not a good compliment, though, I guess.
Is it not now?
Yeah, it makes me feel like the snake oil salesman, you know, like you just like seamlessly slip that in there. No, but really, being in the right mindset is key. So even if you don't coach with Tyler, just realize you can improve your odds just alone by this one thing. Yeah. Mindset. Just be in the right mindset.
Yeah. And, you know, I feel like we've talked about, you know, being in the right mindset. It's, you know, we can say that all day, but, you know, learning how to actually do that is, you know, the biggest thing is to put all the focus back on yourself and not on your ex and what they're doing and who they're with and that kind of thing. And instead of putting all that energy towards that, putting it back internally and focusing on you getting better, going to the gym, you know, looking better, you know, going back to your new hobbies and, you know, really getting good at things again, because I'm sure those lacked when you were in a relationship. And so that's how you do that.
I don't know how much more to say. We're just nailing the head on the nail on the head here. I guess one thing we should say is if you're interested in working with one of our coaches, all you have to do is just go to Ex-Boyfriend Recovery or Ex-Girlfriend Recovery and pop up the coaching page and just sign up. We've got availability open. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, just type in Ex-Boyfriend Recovery or Ex-Girlfriend Recovery and sign up while you can.
For sure. Yeah. And we're happy to have you anytime. And, you know, I feel like, you know, you get a whole hour with us. And so that's the nice thing. We get to know the semantics and details of everything that's going on in your individual situation. And sometimes there are, you know, we've designed, you know, more of a game plan for, you know, what generally you should do for an ex, but you know, there's some changes that you can make along the way depending upon your individual situation. And the only way you get that is through coaching.
Yeah. I mean, the devil is truly in the details. This is one of the reasons why I think coaching is kind of an essential part of the program. We do have kind of like the digital program that kind of gives you, this is the lay of the land. This is what we found works generally.
Yes.
But what we don't do in there is we don't say this is exactly how you need to respond to them in a long distance situation if you've been blocked and this happens. This is exactly how you need to get out of being blocked or be like get noticed again if you feel like he's beginning to ghost you or lose interest in you in text messaging in this specific situation. So the devil is kind of in the details, because a lot of times what happens is you'll read the program and you'll be like, wow, this is so much information. It's great, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Well, you need a real life person to help you with that. Yep. And a real life person, I mean, Tyler.
For sure. For sure.
So again, if you're interested in taking, I almost said taking a class. If you're interested in taking a class with Tyler, just check out the coaching page on our website and we will get you hooked up.
Yeah.
Any
awesome.
Final words to say to everyone listening?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything. You know, we kind of, you know, just to summarize, you know, natting is never a good thing to do. And what was your acronym again, Chris?
Going nuts at texting. See,
There we go.
You forgot the acronym, but now I'm going to drill it into your head because that is like the best acronym ever.
It really is, though.
Going nuts at texting.
Yeah. Right. And so, what was that?
Sorry. I thought we were going to do back and forth. You can see Tyler and I are, where we're like chomping at the bit to get the next one. So why don't you take it?
Yeah. So I think another big one that I see a lot, is, and we kind of talked about, was trying to immediately get commitment out of your ex, coming out of no contact and immediately trying to retry things. Yeah.
Then we got why texting isn't the key to getting them back, which is like you coming into this thinking there's a specific phrase you can say to fix them. Then you've got texting, using text messages to tell your ex that you've changed instead of showing your ex that you've changed. And then the biggie, which is being in the right state of mind before you talk to your ex.
Yeah, definitely. And those are definitely a lot to consider, what not to do when you are texting.
Well, there you go. You guys got it. Again, if you want to sign up with Tyler, make sure you get to that coaching page and sign up while you still can.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Well, we'll see you next time.